Welcome to the Rational Farid. So, you think you know what an angel is, right? When I say the word angel, I bet you're picturing one of two things. You're either seeing a guy in a white robe with big, fluffy wings, the kind of thing you see in a medieval painting, or if you're a real Bible nerd, you're thinking of those wild, multi-eyed, spinning wheels of fire from Ezekiel. And you definitely know the story of the fallen angel. Lucifer, the most beautiful angel, gets a big head, gets full of pride, decides he wants to run the universe, stages a coup, and gets drop-kicked out of heaven by Michael and his buddies. It's a nice, simple morality tale. Pride comes before the fall. But what if that entire story is a retcon? What if the first story, the original one, the one that scared the religious authors so much they basically banned it, what if it had nothing to do with pride? What if it was about something far more scandalous? The source material we're digging into today, based on the work of scholars like Professor Lawrence Stuckenbrook, points to something fascinating. He confirms that in the ancient world, angels weren't these effeminate, genderless beings. The texts are clear, they were described as male. And as Stuckenbrook says, this raises, of course, some very interesting questions when it comes to what angels do. Oh yeah, it does, because the Book of Enoch tells us exactly what 200 of them did. The original rebellion wasn't about pride, it was about lust. We're talking about a text that describes 200 angels, a rebel faction, looking down from heaven, seeing human women, and I'll quote, falling in love with the daughters of humanity and deciding to come down and, well, just produce offspring. This is the book, 1 Enoch, and it doesn't just tell a different, weirder story, it exposes where the entire demon mythology of the New Testament actually comes from. Stick around. You've been reading the holy books wrong. So, that scandalous story I just teased, it's all in the Book of Enoch. So, we have to ask the obvious question, what is this thing? Let's get this out of the way right now. When I say Book of Enoch, I'm not talking about some lost, ancient secret scroll that was just dug up in a cave. This is a known quantity. Scholars like Professor Stuckenbrook, who we're leaning on today, call it 1 Enoch. And the first thing you have to understand is, it's not one book. It's not like the Gospel of Matthew or one of Paul's letters, which you can mostly pin to a specific time or author. As Stuckenbrook says, Book 1 of Enoch is not a single book. It is a collection of books. I call it a greatest hits album of Jewish apocalyptic fan fiction. It's a collection of at least 5 major books, plus some appendices, all written by different people at different times and then stitched together. And this right here is the most important part, the timeline. Stuckenbrook nails this. He says these traditions were composed between the 3rd century BCE and the very end of the 1st century CE. Let's break that down. We're talking about a 400-year period. Think about what that means. This stuff was being written before the Jesus character was invented, during the time the Gospels say he was living, and alongside the authors who were writing the rest of the New Testament. It's the literal source material. It's the creative soup that the New Testament writers were swimming in. And what's this whole massive universe-ending saga based on? A couple of super vague lines in Genesis. That's it. It's about a guy, Enoch, who walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. That's all these authors had to go on. And from those 2 lines, they spun out this massive detailed cosmology. So why isn't it in your average Protestant Bible? Why was it banned? Well, it wasn't some big Dan Brown conspiracy. It was just sidelined. It was too weird, too late, and it competed with other narratives. But as you're about to see, I think it was sidelined because it reveals the source code. It's the rough draft. It shows step by step how the sausage of Christianity was made. And you can't have the making of documentary in the same box set as the final movie. It ruins the magic. All right, so forget that story your pastor told you about Lucifer and his pride. That's a later invention. It's a theological retcon designed to make the story all clean and abstract, a battle of ideas. But 1 Enoch, which, as we just established, is older than the New Testament, tells a completely different story. And honestly, it's a way more human and believable one. The first section of 1 Enoch is called the Book of the Watchers, and it lays out the real original sin of the angels. It says a group of 200 watcher angels were up in heaven, doing whatever angels do. And they looked down at earth, and they saw human women, and they thought they were hot. See, you have to remember what Professor Stuckenbrock points out. In the ancient biblical world, angels weren't these non-gendered, fluffy-winged, effeminate beings you see in paintings. The texts are clear. They were understood as male figures. And what did these male angels, who were beguiled by the beauty of women, do? They rebelled. Their leader, a guy named Shimikaza, gets the 200 of them together, and he basically says, listen guys, I know what we're all thinking, but I'm worried if I'm the only one who does this, I'm gonna take the fall for this terrible sin all by myself. So what do? They swear an oath, all 200 of them. They make a pact on a mountain that they will all go down, they will all take human wives, and they will all produce offspring. It's a cosmic mob pact, so no one can rat anyone else out. And they do it. They come down, they have sex with the women. This right here, this is the original angelic rebellion. It has nothing to do with pride. It's not a theological dispute. It's lust. The first fall wasn't about wanting to be God. It was about wanting to sleep with God's new creations. And as you're about to see, therefore the consequences of that act are what create the entire monster manual for the New Testament. So these 200 watcher angels come down, they break their cosmic parole, and they take human women as partners. Therefore, what happens next? You guessed it. They have kids. But we're not talking about normal, bouncing baby boys. This is a mythological hybrid. And the texts, like 1 Enoch and the Book of Jubilees, are obsessed with this. They call the offspring the giants, the Nephilim. And they are an absolute disaster. These things are a catastrophe. According to the source material, these giants are so violent that the giants have killed so many and destroyed a lot of what God has created. They're wrecking the planet. The texts describe human souls crying out to heaven because of the chaos. It's the first apocalypse. So God has to act. He hits the big red reset button and sends the great flood. The flood comes and it wipes out the bodies of these giants. Problem solved, right? Wrong. And this right here is the single most important plot point in this entire mythology. This is the key that unlocks everything. You cannot destroy their spirits. Why not? Because, as Professor Stuckenbrook points out from the early Enochic tradition, their offspring is half angel and half human. They're hybrids. They're a glitch in the system. They aren't fully human, so their souls can't just pass on, but they aren't fully angel, so they can't go back to heaven. They don't belong anywhere. So their bodies die, but their spirits live on. You now have these angry, disembodied spirits, the ghosts of dead giants, left to wander the earth. They're homeless. They're pissed off. And they are prone to attack humans, and this is the crucial part. They want to get back at the kind of existence that they once had. Let's put that together. What do we call angry, disembodied spirits born from a sinful union that are left to torment humanity and try to get back into a physical body? Yep, bingo. Demons. This is the literary invention of the demon. The evil spirits that the New Testament is so obsessed with, they aren't the original fallen angels. They're the ghost of the angels' giant kids. And that changes everything. This is the moment right here where it all clicks. We just established that the Enochic tradition invented this new class of monster, evil spirits. And what are they? They're the disembodied, homeless ghosts of dead giants. Their entire motivation is to enter bodies as a way to reclaim the existence they once had. Therefore, if demons are just the ghosts of dead giants desperate for a body, what is the number one most repeated miracle in the New Testament Gospels? Demonic possession. Ever thought about how weird that is? How obsessed the Gospels are with this thing? The Old Testament doesn't really have this. You don't see Moses or David or Isaiah running around casting out demons that have entered people. But in the Gospels, it's everywhere. The Jesus character's entire ministry is built on it. And it's not just that demons are attacking people from the outside. The texts are hyper-specific. Professor Stuckenbrook nails it. He points out that the Gospels use a stable or consistent language where spirits are entering into bodies. When the Jesus character performs an exorcism, the Greek word is ekbalein, to kick out or cast out. The demons have to be removed from within. This in and out language is the smoking gun. Stuckenbrook is clear. There is no other literature that depicts this going in and having to be gotten out, like that which we find in the Enochic tradition. The gospel writers were swimming in this Enochic worldview. This is the key. It explains the most bizarre stories. Remember the Gadarene demoniac? The one where the demons, named Legion, begged the Jesus character not to be destroyed? What do they ask for instead? Send us into the herd of pigs. Think about that. They're so desperate to be in any physical body, to not be homeless spirits, that they'd rather possess pigs than face being disembodied. That story makes zero sense without one Enoch. The authors of the Gospels were not getting new divine revelation. They were just using the monster manual that had been written 200 years earlier. 1 Enoch is the instruction manual for the Gospel's demonology. Period. Okay, fine. So 1 Enoch invented the entire concept of demons for the Gospel writers. That's a big deal, right? You're probably thinking, okay, Farid, that's a huge link, but that's just the Gospels. But what if I told you the influence doesn't stop there? Not even close. What about the other big, weird book? The grand finale, the final boss of the New Testament. Let's talk about the Book of Revelation. You'd think that book, the one that's supposedly a direct, unvarnished vision of the end times, would be 100% original, right? A brand new revelation. Nope, not even a little. When scholars like Professor Stuckenbrook actually sit down and compare the texts, the results are staggering. He was surprised by what he found. Get this, he counts at least 50, I think well over 50, maybe 55 instances where Revelation and the various parts of 1 Enoch share the exact same motifs, language, and symbols. 50! Now, you could say, Farid, maybe they're just both drawing on the same broader traditions, and that's a fair point for some of them. But here's the clincher. He says there are, at his last count, 18 instances of a combination of motifs or a combination of words and phrases that are found only in 1 Enoch and the Book of Revelation. That's not an accident. That's not a broader context. As Stuckenbrook says, that is a straight line between the two traditions. Think about what that means. The author of Revelation, this John of Patmos, is writing his big, trippy, apocalyptic fan fiction. And he's not formally quoting 1 Enoch, because that's not how they did it. He's just using it. He's sampling it. He's remixing it. He's treating the Enochic playbook with the exact same authority as the books of Daniel, Isaiah, and Ezekiel. To him, it was all part of the same literary toolkit. In fact, Stuckenbrook points out that the, quote, sequence of eschatological events, that's the academic term for the end of the world checklist, from Revelation 18 to 21 corresponds very closely to the sequence already laid out in 1 Enoch. He copied his homework. The Christian apocalypse wasn't a new vision, it's just a cover band playing Enoch's greatest hits. Alright, so let's recap. One Enoch gave the gospel writers their demons. One Enoch gave the author of Revelation his apocalypse playbook. You'd think that would be enough. You'd think, okay, that's a massive fundamental influence. But what if I told you we haven't even gotten to the craziest part, the real bombshell? The Enochic tradition didn't just provide the monsters and the end times plot, it provided the template for the main character. To see this, we have to look at the sequel, a later text called 3 Enoch or Hebrew Enoch. And this is where the authors, well, they just go completely off the rails in the best way possible. In this text, the original human Enoch, the guy who walked with God, he doesn't just visit heaven, he keeps ascending, he keeps getting promoted. He goes so high up the cosmic ladder that, as Professor Stuckenbrook explains, the Enoch character is then fused with an angelic being. He's not just Enoch anymore, he's transformed. He gets a new name, Metatron. And what's Metatron? Is he just a more powerful angel? Oh no. Stuckenbrook points out the name itself is a clue. Meta, meaning with, and tron from the Greek thronos, meaning throne. He is the one with the throne, the one beside the throne. This Metatron is so exalted, so powerful, that he's even referred to by a shocking title, the Lesser Yahweh, a second, lesser god. This, as you can imagine, caused a massive scandal. Stuckenbrook tells us about the story where another rabbi has a vision, goes up to heaven, and sees Metatron sitting on the throne. This is a cosmic oh shit moment because nobody sits in heaven but God. The rabbi immediately declares there are two powers in heaven. This was the ultimate heresy. The authors of 3 Enoch got so scared by their own idea that they wrote in a panic fix where God orders another angel to drag Metatron off his throne and give him a number of lashes with fire just to prove he's not the real God. It is the most clumsy, panicked retcon in the history of mythology. Therefore, let's pause and think about what this literary template is. You have a human man, Enoch, who ascends to heaven, who is fused with the divine and transformed into Metatron, who is exalted to a godlike status, the lesser Yahweh, and who sits on a throne at God's side. A concept so radical, it's called the two powers in heaven heresy. Now tell me, a human man who ascends to heaven, becomes divine, and sits on a throne at the right hand of God. Sound familiar? This is the exact literary blueprint for the character of Jesus Christ. The New Testament authors, writing as mythicists, were trying to sell their guy as the ultimate divine agent, but they didn't invent the concept. The framework for a lesser Yahweh, a divine agent, a son who acts on God's behalf, what Stuckenbrook calls the conceptual framework within which to understand the early developments in Christology, it was already there. The Son of Man that the Jesus character is always talking about, that's not an original title. As Stuckenbrook points out, even in 1 Enoch, the human Enoch has a mystical vision where he's suddenly told, you are the Son of Man. He becomes the cosmic judge. The Son of Man wasn't a person. It was a role. It was a job description from a popular, pre-existing apocalyptic story. And the authors of the Gospels simply cast their lead actor to play the part. So let's pull it all together. We've gone on this whole journey. We've dug up the original, scandalous story of lusty angels. We've spawned a race of hybrid giants. We've created a new class of monster called demons. We've written the playbook for the apocalypse. And we've even workshopped the very idea of a human-turned God. Therefore, let's go right back to the question in the title. Why was the Book of Enoch banned? Why was it sidelined, left out of the Protestant canon, and shoved in a drawer by so many religious authorities for so long? My conclusion is this. It wasn't sidelined because it was wrong or heretical. It was sidelined because it was too revealing. It's the receipt. It's the making of documentary. It's the literary paper trail that shows, step by step, exactly how the magic trick was done. It shows us, clear as day, that the core components of Christian mythology were not new revelations. It shows us where the gospel writers got their entire concept of demons. They weren't a new satanic force, they were a direct literary lift from one Enoch, the disembodied homeless ghost of dead giants desperate to possess a body. It shows us where the author of Revelation got his apocalypse playbook. He wasn't getting a fresh vision of the end times, he was remixing Enoch's timeline, themes, and judgments, treating it with the same authority as Daniel or Ezekiel. And most importantly, it shows us a template for the Christ character himself, the heretical Jewish idea of a human man, Enoch, ascending to heaven, being transformed into a divine agent, Metatron, and sitting on a throne beside God as a lesser Yahweh. The foundational ideas of Christianity, the demonology, the apocalypse, and even the central God-man character, they were all invented, developed, and workshopped in Jewish apocalyptic literature for centuries before the first gospel author ever put pen to papyrus. The Book of Enoch exposes Christianity not as a divine intervention, but as the next most successful evolution of a very human and very weird mythological story. If you want exclusive content, early access to videos, and want to support this rational quest, consider joining our YouTube membership community. You become part of the family, helping us navigate this rich tapestry of ancient narratives. Until next time, keep delving, keep questioning, and stay curious.